Good morning and welcome to Backpack to Briefcase. I'm John Ambrose. I'm a corporate relations specialist here at the Huntsman School, and it's my pleasure to introduce Justin Forer and Parker Jenks. They're two of our students here, and they're going to talk about how they were able to land some competitive internships and full-time placement from here at the Huntsman School. One of the missions of the Huntsman School is specifically from John Huntsman himself, was that the education and opportunity provided from the Huntsman School of Business would be able to make it so that students here could compete with the best and brightest in the world. And we here feel that Justin and Parker are examples of this. For context, Justin, for example, is just placed at Susquehanna Growth Equity and is the first Utah State student to be able to place there. In fact, he's the first non-Ivy League student to be able to place there. Parker Jenks has also been able to place at Partners Group. And while a couple other Aggies have been there, the competition is tough. In this last cohort, he went up against graduates from Cornell, Yale, and the Wharton School, to name a few. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Justin to get us started and how the two of them can just walk us through how they were able to get and compete with some of the best and brightest in the world. Justin?
Thank you, John, for that very warm introduction. As you said, my name is Justin Farrar, and we're going to be speaking about, the insights and advice and things that we've learned throughout our internship, applications and interview process. Really, I just want to start off with this quote that actually a recruiter shared with me a while back, where they said, "I believe Utah State students are just as qualified and just as smart as applicants from Ivy League schools. However, they lack polish." This was definitely my case. I remember going into a couple of my very first interviews and completely bombing it, and still bomb them to this day. But our hope is, that through our mistakes and through the insight that Parker and I have gained throughout our university, career, that we can share it and hopefully help future students avoid the same mistakes that we've made. For context, and this is, not at all to try and say, put us on a pedestal, but these are some of the firms that Parker and I have interviewed with. And while it's heavily catered towards, finance, economics, type businesses, the principles that we're going to share are the same. And just know that, if you follow these principles, you'll be able to interview at these top tier firms and be able to be, competitive with students from Ivy League schools or the best of the best. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Parker really fast.
So these are kind of the big things that if you're going to take away anything from watching this video or being on the live session today, it's these things. And that's some of the best tips I've heard regarding getting a job, applying for jobs. And it's also got a few of my own that I've learned the hard way. And the first one should be that finding a job or an internship is a part-time job. So you should be looking, especially for some of these competitive ones, to spend about 20 hours a week minimum. And as you get closer to the application date, it's going to be upwards of maybe 30 or 40, if not more. And expect that, and that's okay. Just know that it'll all pay off in the long run, and that the more work you put in, the higher opportunities that are going to be available to you. The next one is that you should always act like a professional in your field and be working as hard as they do. So, for example, if you want to be in investment banking, you have to understand that they're working 80 to 100 hours a week. And if you want a job like that, you need to put in that time now. Don't expect that down the road you'll put it in when you have the job. It takes a lot of effort right away. And so look to be spending as much time and be working as hard as they do if that's really the profession that you want to be in, and test your kind of mental fortitude and push yourself to put that much effort in. And the next one is that, and this is one of my personal favorites, and I want to make sure that USU students get it because I hear it talked about all the time, both among students and also on LinkedIn, is that spamming applications is a waste of time. And what I mean here is by just going on Handshake, hitting apply is a waste of time. And for some reason, it's become almost an attitude or a flex saying, well, I've gotten 100 rejection letters. To me, that's not that interesting. It doesn't say that much. Really, you should be measuring your success when interviewing and applying to jobs by the number of people you're talking with, not the number of applications you submitted. And lastly is that, honestly, for these opportunities, the best and brightest in the world are chasing these things. And if you're not working your tail off for something like this, especially for someone coming from Utah State, because you do have to make up ground, then somebody else is going to work harder than you, and you're not going to get it. And that's just one thing that you really have to be aware of going into this, starting your as early as your freshman or even sophomore year.
Yeah, and the one thing I do want to add, if this looks daunting, the 20 hours a week, that's, as Parker mentioned, is spent talking to people, right? It's not like you're sitting there doing a super hard research project. It shouldn't be something that's heavily taxing. And on top of that, I mean, I guarantee that each of you is going to have a class, if you haven't already, where you spend roughly that amount of time, whether it's studying, working on group projects, or whatever it may seem. And so while that number is kind of daunting at first, all of these things are things that any Utah State student could be doing in their spare time. Whether it's hitting up your friends and family members saying, hey, do you know anyone who works for XYZ company, or outreaching to former Aggies on LinkedIn, asking them to get on a quick Zoom call and talk about their career field. All of these things are things that you can easily do today. So we're going to go over kind of the 5 golden rules of interviewing. And again, most of these are things that Parker and I had to learn the hard way through epic failures on our part. And so our goal here is to help share, best practices and things that you can do to avoid the same pitfalls that we fell into. And those are, network, and network some more. Do your homework beforehand, and we're not talking about schoolwork, so we'll go into that. Know your story by heart and tailor it to each interview. Go into each interview with genuine, predetermined questions, and make sure to follow up. So Parker's going to talk to us first about networking.
So I know a lot of people seem to be scared by this. It seems a little bit overwhelming, but honestly, networking is really just getting on the phone and asking someone for 15 minutes of their time. It's not overwhelming, but it can be a little bit daunting at first. And the best way to do it is just to start. And I know it sounds intimidating, but you're going to get on a call with some people and it's going to go horribly. I've had some really painful, informational interview calls that didn't go well, and that was to no fault but my own. And so expect those mistakes and know that it's perfectly okay. The one strategy I'd use is go to the people who are perfectly comfortable with you, maybe not knowing everything about the industry or not knowing as much as you should. So that means your alumni network, maybe a recent graduate that that's got a job in the space you're interested. Talk to people that it's totally comfortable for you to maybe not know something that you should, and then they're willing to say, hey, just by the way, this is something you should know about the industry. So reach out to those people first, and then slowly start broadening your network to family members, to really alumni that have maybe graduated 5 or 10 years down the road. And lastly, start reaching out to other people regardless of where they're from. It could be a friend or someone from BYU that you might be comfortable reaching out to. Maybe you served in the same mission, whatever random connection you can make, jump on that ship and try your best to just be as professional as possible. And so when reaching out to people like we have here, the mediums that you can use are LinkedIn, Gmail, or just email in general, Facebook, and Handshake. I'm most comfortable with LinkedIn and Gmail. Using Gmail is really easy. I know it might sound daunting, but if you have a Zoom Info account, it's really easy to find people's email. Or you can just look, for example, if you're interested in with someone at Goldman Sachs, their typical email string is firstname.lastname@gs.com. And so you can look that up, look at what an email string is for a business, and then guess their email and send a cold email. And make it really brief, short, ask for 15 minutes of their time, send a few questions that you're interested in asking them, and that's it. Know that they're probably not going to respond. Don't expect a response. Don't be constantly waiting for a response. Just keep going. And if they respond, it's a hopeful surprise. And so reach out to these platforms, use LinkedIn as much as you can. That said, make sure that your profile is professional. There's countless services at the Huntsman School that help you build a really great looking and established professional LinkedIn that you can use. And so once you have the call, you set it up, they responded, they say they're happy to meet with you. Maybe you can send them your Calendly so that they can schedule time and see your schedule for a 15-minute call. Do something like that. And then maybe a day, at least 24 hours before your call, send them an agenda with, hey, thank you for your time today, or your time tomorrow. I'm excited for the call. Looking forward to reach out to you. Here are 3 questions or 4 questions I want to ask for your call. Reminder, it's only going to be 15 minutes. Thank you again. Please send over any materials that you'd like me to read over or think about in advance. That's a really simple way to show that you are very much on top of it, and that if maybe they can answer your questions or say, hey, it's a really great question you've asked. My firm actually just recently put out an article that addresses that exact question. Take a look at it, and then if you have any follow-up, we can talk about that. Otherwise, like, let me know of other questions you have. That happens all the time, and it looks great for you, showing that you're on top of it and you're trying your best to make it a very productive 15 minutes on their end. And then after the call, please send a thank you. And reminder that mediocre students just send, hey, thanks for your time yesterday, enjoyed the call. Great students reach out and say, hey, I had a great call yesterday. Here are 3 things that stood out to me that were really helpful that you shared, and I'm glad you did. If there's anything else, feel free to add. That shows that you took notes during the call, you were really active, you're thinking about it, trying to decide what was most beneficial for you, and you're sharing that with them so they can go forward and maybe add anything or adjust maybe some of your key takeaways. Those are really just the simple steps of networking. The best thing you can do is just start now. It might seem intimidating, but really this piece is the foundation of any successful interview. When you get into an actual interview, knowing and being able to speak to the number of people you talked with in the firm, or especially in the division you're applying for, is the most helpful thing you can have. Having a perfect GPA, having great leadership or club experience is fine, but being able to actually talk to the number of people you've spoken with and share your experiences with, that's what's the most beneficial and something to look out for.
Yeah, thanks, Parker. And just to reiterate, for a moment, just imagine that you were, the person being interviewed, working in industry. If there was a student who, first of all, reached out to you in such a professional manner and followed up with, hey, I've got an agenda for tomorrow, and then followed up saying, hey, I learned these 3 things. I mean, wouldn't you be inclined to help that student? I mean, there are very, very few people who actually are doing those things. And so just by doing something as simple as that, which would maybe take, 5 minutes of your time to say, okay, initial outreach, what is it that you like about your job? What is it that, you're most proud about at the firm you work for? What is the day-to-day, week for, or day-to-day, bit life for you at XYZ company? I mean, not necessarily questions that you had to think super hard about, which we'll go into asking questions later, but just, ways to make you stand out. And if you're nervous, like Parker said, it's best to start today. That's why I included, Facebook. My very first networking experience was actually through Facebook. It was an old neighbor of mine who, moved away years ago, and I knew he worked in banking. I wasn't sure what, but sent him a little message on Facebook saying, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I was, the little next door neighbor kid. I remember you worked in banking. I would love to hear about your story. And he was like, absolutely, let's jump on the call. Like, I'll, talk to you about banking. And like Parker said, I expected it to be 15 minutes. And he spent the next hour and a half talking to me about the ins and outs of banking, and was like, hey, like, let me introduce you to this person and this person. And it's just an entire waterfall effect, right? And so start today. If you're uncomfortable cold reaching out to people, start with your network. I guarantee, whether it's your parents, your parents' friends, some family member, someone uses an accountant or knows someone who works in finance or marketing. Like, use the network that you already have built to make introductions to these fields. So we're going to move on to do your homework before. And this one personally is very important to me, mostly because I have bombed several interviews because I went into the interview, expecting to learn more about the company. And, really they were expecting me to already understand the division that I was applying for, the role that I was applying for, to already know company culture and company, pillars of excellence that each company has. And so I cannot stress how important it is to do your homework on the company beforehand so that when you get into the interview, you are already ahead of the competition. And what we mean by that, so let's say you're applying to Morgan Stanley, right? So at the very bare minimum, you should read the company website, right? If they're, you look up the company online, typically if there's some big event of the company, they'll have it like right in the pop-up, or they'll have, thoughts on the market podcast, at scale podcast. I mean, you can, listen to these, see what, people at Morgan Stanley are talking about. Every company in the entire world is going to have, this doesn't look like the pointer thing is going to work. Okay, there we go. This about us right here. Every company in the world has that, right? And so when you click on that, it's got your, core values, leadership, history, locations, diversity, all of these things. I mean, it takes you what, maybe 20 seconds to read through this core values. Guarantee if you can go into the interview and say, why are you here? Well, I want to go to Morgan, or I want to work at Morgan Stanley because you believe in doing things right, putting clients first, leading with exceptional ideas, a commitment to diversity and inclusion, and giving back. I mean, already right there, it shows, okay, this person has done their research. They actually are interested in Morgan Stanley and not just, as Parker said, spam applying to every possible job. They don't care where they land. And so at the bare minimum, if you're rushed for time, make sure that you read, the about us. And I guarantee every single company you could ever be interested has one of these. Because again, that's just a way to set yourself apart. On top of that, if you really want to stand out, and this is something that I know I've done and Parker has done, and he can, speak to this. If you go in there and you can speak to, hey, I noticed the other day there was, this article or podcast where someone from Morgan Stanley, spoke to this news company and they published, XYZ thing, or, I was reading your recent, 10K and you guys talked about this initiative and this initiative. They are going to be absolutely blown out of the water, right? There is not a single Ivy League kid that is going to have, done that in terms of preparation, because they have that, almost that clout of saying, hey, I'm from Yale, I'm from Wharton. But if you can do that, it shows, passion and a desire to work there. At the end of the day, people want to hire individuals that want to be there. I mean, a lot of the times these top tier jobs are, upwards of 40 hours a week. And so, I mean, think about it. Would you want to work with, we've all been in those group projects where there's someone who doesn't contribute. You want people that want to be there and want to work hard. Something that has really helped me is setting up Google alerts. It may seem something, kind of silly, but if you go in and type just the name of the company, anytime that company name appears in Google, it'll just shoot you a quick email and say, hey, so-and-so was mentioned in this article. And I cannot tell you how many times I've benefited from doing that. I mean, we're busy students, but companies that I've interested in where it said, hey, they were just mentioned here. And then you can reach back out to those people that you've networked with and just say, hey, I noticed either you or your colleague or your division was mentioned, in the news. Great to see you guys are doing awesome things. Like, we should connect sometime soon. I mean, super easy way to follow up networking. It gives you something to talk about. So you're not like, hey, I can't remember if you told me about your dog or your, family or what. Like, it's just a super easy way to make a Google work for you. Right. And there are so many times where, like, in my own personal networking, I'll forget, like, oh, I was talking to someone at Goldman, or I was talking to someone at JP Morgan, because you're trying to network and meet so many different people, that this can just make it an easy way of saying, okay, I need to follow up, and here's an interesting item that I can reference in my follow-up. So really quick, I guess, just to summarize, what winning candidates are going to do is, and this sounds kind of funny, but a lot of times, you'll get an email from HR saying, hey, you're going to interview with Michael next Monday. And so you can go into LinkedIn and type in, Michael, to see who from, XYZ company is named Michael that works there. And you can see, okay, my interviewer, graduated from the U of U, so we have that connection. Or, oh, they volunteer here, so, I can bring that up. And you can make it so that you can go into the interview with a couple cards in your hand, right? You know a little bit more about them. Practice a lot with different people. If you are not using the Career Services Center, I don't know what to tell you, because they are fantastic. They're always willing to mock interview with you, and they are going to give you the best advice possible. I mean, I cannot say how awesome it is that we as business students have access to that when the rest of the university shares one office, right? And so use that resource and use your friends, right? Use people that you've networked with. I mean, even if it's just, hey, I'm interviewing at a different firm, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to give me some advice on, my story, or maybe do a quick mock interview with me. People are more than willing to help out with that. Collaborate with individuals. Don't be shy from, personal accomplishments. This is one thing that it really bothers me, but Utah State students are way too humble, right? Like, all of you are doing super awesome things, and you discount it because it's like, we're not at we're not at Wharton, we're not at Yale, but all of you are doing such cool things that you need to be able to speak to and speak confidently about. Like, I don't think that we realize how awesome it is that some of the programs that people are involved with. And if you don't tell them how cool it is, like, they're not going to realize it, right? Like, don't be afraid to be boastful. Sorry, Parker, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, just put it in perspective for a second. Like, imagine that you just finished an interview, and let's be honest, this all happens. They go back in the room, they have a discussion of, oh, like, what do we think of this person? What do we think of this person? Never once can I imagine the interviewer is going back to a room and saying, Justin, what stood out about Justin? He was just so humble. Like, he has done so many amazing things, but he was just really humble about it. They don't do that because they don't know. And so if you're not sharing what you've done to them, it just means you're not as cool as you actually are. So don't shy away from the things you've done. Make sure they know about it, and make sure they know how cool it was and how impactful it was to be involved in something like that.
No, yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, and if you're banking on them realizing how humble you are, it's just not going to happen unless you have, networked like crazy, and you've networked with every single person in that room that's going to be discussing your candidacy. The final thing, and we're going to come back to this, don't worry about being annoying. So with, the Google alerts, following up and asking people to meet with you, to, network with you. I mean, a lot of times, if you're annoying, people will tell you. But I found that coming from Utah, we're very polite, we're very conscious of people's time, and so we don't want to infringe upon that. People are more than willing to help students, and especially students who are willing to put in the time and follow up and say, hey, I know you're busy, but I really want to meet with you. I want to talk about your job. I want to, get to where you are in life. Like, people will make the time for you, but you have to, be assertive and show that you want it. Some things that only average candidates are going to do, you don't remember the interviewer's name. I mean, obviously that's not super strong. You feel entitled because you have a great resume, but you don't, speak to those accomplishments. You don't actually explain to them why it's so cool that you've done what you've done. And especially uneducated on firm culture. I think in our day and age, and maybe this is just a personal opinion, but companies care so much more about if you are a cultural fit than if you are the most qualified person. I can say right now, most of the jobs that I have applied for, and most of the internships I've done, I was definitely not the most qualified person, and probably never will be. But they just want to find people that are interesting and that they feel like they can work with. And so don't ever shy away from, applying for your dream job just because you feel like, you may not be the most qualified candidate. If you're passionate about the place, I mean, they want people that want to be there. And finally, like Parker mentioned, a short follow-up email that just says, hey, thanks so much for your time. I mean, if you can say, hey, thank you so much for your time, like, this completely changed my perspective on XYZ, like, now I'm thinking about this, blah, 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 like, that just shows so much more interest, and I'm so much more willing as a person in industry to willing to help that person than before. And I really like this. The only silver bullet is practicing and working harder than anyone else. I believe that, Utah State students, we can land at any firm if you put in the time. I mean, we consistently are landing people at the most prestigious firms in the United States. And it's students that are willing to put in more time than anybody else to get where they want to be. So now we're going to move over to tailoring your story, because there's one question that you're always going to get, and it comes in either two forms. They're either going to say, walk me through your resume, or tell me about yourself. And Parker is going to explain, why that is such a common question and why it's so important to nail it.
So the biggest mistake I made in the 2.5 years that I was interviewing was I didn't get this question right, and I didn't put enough time into it just because I thought they wanted to know just a little bit about me. But really, so much is hinging on this question, because it shows, like, this one question kind of reveals whether you're a cultural fit for the firm or not. And so students at Utah State often, like, I've sat on interviews with other students, I've sat on another table, whether it's through the University Growth Fund, through doing club leadership assignments. I know what it's like to hear a really good tell me about yourself and what it's like to hear a bad one. And mind you, this is the very first thing they're hearing about the question. And so this sets the table for the rest of the interview. If they are impressed, all of a sudden they're super interested in what you have to say and everything else. And if they're not impressed, then they're kind of counting down the minutes until your next interview is over. And so what I hear people do all the time, and this falls into the don'ts list, is that they think they can just wing it, that you can get up there and once they ask you to tell about yourself, you'll just kind of go on and say, well, my name is Parker. I actually grew up in Logan. I spent some time and as a missionary, and then I started at Utah State and I've liked it. It's been pretty good. Like, students do that all the time, and it just sounds unprepared. It sounds not very thoughtful. Rather, you should be tailoring it to and really preparing it to the specific firm you're working for and the position you're applying for. And so the other thing that students do all the time that I want to dissuade you from is talking about your hobbies. Unfortunately, the interviewer doesn't care. He doesn't care that you like to ski. He doesn't care that you like to mountain bike. Even if you know that the interviewer likes to do it, let it come up organically. Don't just bring it up in your story. I know you want to talk about it. It makes you sound interesting, but they really don't care. If you really want someone to know what, like, something cool that you like to do, then put it on the miscellaneous piece at the bottom of your resume. Other than that, don't even bother. And lastly is the ending. And people like to just maybe draw it on and say, so that's a little bit about me, or that's me. Instead, it should be ending at a really high point that reveals why exactly you want to be working in the position that you're applying for or the firm you're applying for. If you can really end at that strong point, they don't even need to ask you why you want to work at the firm. They don't even need to necessarily ask why you're interested in that industry. They can just move on to other questions, and they don't have to waste time on that. And instead, you can focus on other things. And so the do's, really what you should be focusing on your story is keep it short and sweet. People ramble on this all the time. Don't do that. It gets so annoying. Instead, just max it out at 2 minutes. And if you're going to go over 2 minutes, please have a compelling reason to do that. And by compelling, I mean you need to have that reason verified with, like, a mentor or professor that you work closely with, because 2 minutes is the max. And really, it should be averaged about at 1:30. And lastly, like I mentioned before, after the interview is finished, they need to be wowed. They need to be really impressed and excited to hear more of what you have to say. And that just comes through practice, through rehearsal, through fine tuning it when practicing with others and talking with other professionals in the industry. They know what stories make sense and they know what stories don't make sense. They also know what parts of your story might be irrelevant. The next piece is so you don't want to memorize it necessarily, but you do want to write out what you're saying. That means practicing it, bullet pointing it, whatever you're doing. Just make sure that you can comfortably say almost the same thing every time without it sounding routine. That's a big fear, the thing you have to watch out for. And one thing I'd like to mention is when doing these stories, it's a really great practice or way to practice is by recording yourself, listening to it. And once you feel like you have a great story, send it to someone you know you can trust, someone who will give you great feedback on your story. It's really easy. We all have smartphones. We can record it, what we're saying, and then send a message to someone we trust and just say, hey, when you have 2 minutes, I'd love to hear, just listen and provide a little bit of feedback. That's what I was doing the week before some of my interviews. And it was so helpful to fine tune it and for them to tell me, hey, I don't think this is super relevant. I feel like you're still missing maybe why you want to work at our firm. Maybe fine tune it in this section around like when you're talking about this to really bring that out. That's what's most valuable. And doing something like that shows how much you care, but that more than anything, the amount of practice you're putting in will show time and time again.
Yeah. And if you're worried about that being a little awkward, just, remember how many times you send, a quick Snapchat or TikTok video to your friends. Like it may be weird at first, but it shouldn't be. And the only thing that I want to stress before we move on from this is in the, tell me about yourself, like making sure that it is short. But again, don't discount like the cool things that you've done. There are ways to include, yeah, I went on Seed where we, went to Peru and helped business owners really get their business off the ground. I'm happy to speak more about that if you have questions, right? Not necessarily going super in depth, but you bring up, hey, I have this really cool experience that I can tell you more about if you'd be interested, right? Like it's just a way of getting in all of those really cool opportunities while staying under, that 2 minute, time frame. And that way, you're almost like helping them feed you easy questions, right? Like, okay, tell me about this, cool opportunity that you went and did in Peru. Like that sounds cool. So just make sure that while you want to keep it short, again, don't discount the cool things that you've done. We're also going to talk about now, so going in with predetermined questions, and Parker is the master on this, so he's going to talk about it.
So I guess two things that I'll mention really quickly. Like I said before, 50% of the interview hinges on the tell me about yourself question, and about 30% of your interview hinges on the questions you're asking at the end. So that really leaves 20% of the interview that is like your star response and the tell me about a time you worked on a team question. That's a very small part of the interview. And yet I feel like so much of us are spending majority of our time on that piece, on making sure that our star responses are fine too. And I'm not discounting how important that is and how we need to stress that, but don't overlook the things that actually matter. I have, just to give a little bit of context on this, I was in a technical interview for Partners Group, and I did not do well on the technical questions. I really feel like I probably got like 60 to 70% of them correct. That's not good if you're wondering. That's basically failing. But the guy I was interviewing with was so impressed with the questions I was asking at the end. When I asked it, he's like, that's such a good question. Like, wow, I'm so excited that you brought that up and I can talk about that. And then I asked him another one and I got the same response. And it's kind of that attitude that really helped me stand out from other candidates, more so than being able to talk about the ways to create value in an LBO transaction. And so when really thinking about your questions, you should spend so much time preparing these things and thinking about them. It could be questions that come up while you're reading through their annual report, through their 10K, through their sustainability reports. Keep track of your thoughts that you have, what impresses you, and tailor your questions to that. Make sure that they're genuine, but also shows how much research you've done in the firm. And so a mediocre question, and you can see this on the bottom, things that I hear all the time, students ask, or things like, in your opinion, what differentiates Partners Group, or what do investors like about Partners Group? Those questions are so mundane and don't really lead to anything, that like the interviewer doesn't even know where to go with it specifically. It's hard for them. They're kind of confused with it at the end. It just doesn't really open the door to further discussion or a meaningful one. And instead, you can see at the top, maybe something better you could say is, hey, it seems like the global infrastructure market is becoming more and more competitive on the renewable energy front. How does PG or Partners Group differentiate itself from the increasing number of players in the space? Now, that shows that, one, I know that the person I'm interviewing with is in the infrastructure space, and so this is something he's dealing with daily. It shows that I know Partners Group is really focused on the renewable energy piece for their infrastructure investments. And lastly, that it's becoming a really competitive market. And one of the challenges for the firm right now is differentiating itself, and so that it can win on deals when investing in that space. So you can see how much depth and how much knowledge it comes out in that one question that the interviewer can then speak to and have a great discussion on. And that can open the door to several additional questions and a really enjoyable discussion. And so when tailoring your questions, really avoid yes, no questions. If they can answer it in one word, you should not be doing it. And the last one, like I mentioned, the next one is showing that you did a lot of homework. And lastly, is that if you're going to ask a cultural-based question or personal question, find some way to make it at least interesting and relevant. I'll share you one of my biggest interviewing mistakes just because I cringe at it. I think it's funny. I was interviewing with the HCM, which is the Human Capital Division of Goldman, one for a summer internship, and I asked them what their favorite book was. That is a terrible question. It's really stupid. And if you're wondering why, just think, what if they don't like reading books? Then all of a sudden they have nothing to say, and I'm left with an awkward, okay, next question. So really be thinking about your questions and have something that can facilitate a great discussion going forward. And this is so much of your interview, and you can really end on a high note by engaging and showing how much thought and care you put into this one aspect of the interview.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight, I mean, in school, I don't think that there are such things as dumb questions. In interviews, there definitely are, right? If you could answer the question by spending 5 minutes on the company website, it's a dumb question. In fact, this is in my experience. So I interviewed with Blackstone's private equity group. It was super awesome. I couldn't believe that I even got considered for the interview. At the end of the interview, I asked, so what is, it was for a division that's a funds of funds, which, if you're interested, you can look it up. But I had no idea what that was. And if I had literally spent more than, 4 minutes on the company website, it explains it word for word. I asked that at the end of the question, and I never heard back from them, which I was like, ooh, that was a really dumb question. And so, as Parker mentioned, if you can show, like in that excellent question, look, I've done research, I've looked into this, I've thought about it, this is, predetermined and it's genuine, I'm interested in it. I mean, that sets you apart from, people that say, so what differentiates Partners Group? I mean, it's essentially the same question, but one shows, hey, look, I've put thought into this, I've put effort into it, and now I genuinely want to hear from like an industry expert. So the last piece that we're going to cover
really quick, Justin, I'll just touch on the culture question because I'm not discounting the importance of culture questions, and I actually feel like I've asked great ones, or I've been asked great ones. I've asked great ones that have really made a great discussion. For example, people maybe had asked, so what do you like about the culture, or what stands out about the culture at your firm? That the interviewer doesn't know where to go with that. Instead, try and tailor it to something that is really personal to you. For me, that was employee recognition, and it's kind of unique. But I've worked at different firms that's hugely, just extremely valuable to them, and so maybe incorporating that and say, hey, well, I did a summer internship here. Something I absolutely loved about that culture and that I've looked for in every firm since then is the way that it recognizes its employees. I'm just curious if you could elaborate on how Partners Group recognizes its employees and how it recognizes them for the excellent work that they're doing. And although maybe that didn't promote the greatest discussion, it was the only time she'd gotten a question like that. And she was like, wow, I actually love talking about that. And that's one of my favorite parts about the firm too. Let me share like some of the highlights I've experienced while working here. And it was an easy way to stand out when talking with someone from HR who I really didn't have a chance to ask maybe a finance specific question or a division specific question. And so that way it really brought on a great discussion without necessarily going super in depth in a topic that neither of us might be super familiar with.
Yeah, very, very good point. And so finally, just because we're encroaching on our time, remember to follow up. And this is so crucial. As I mentioned, there are ways of making it easier on yourself, whether it's using Google Alerts or, I know people that track everything in an Excel sheet, everything from, what we talked about to, when I'm going to follow up next, and they'll put reminders in their phone. If you don't follow up, quite honestly, there was no point in you reaching out to network, and there was no point in you applying. When you think about if you want to work for, a top tier firm, there are thousands of other students that want to work at that same firm that applied for that same role. And if you don't follow up, it is so easy for you to be, forgotten in that mass of students. Even if you had an awesome interview, I mean, it is, just think about it from their perspective. There are so many people to try and remember. And if you can make your follow-up memorable, as Parker mentioned, hey, showing genuine interest, like, thank you so much for your time. I learned this, which takes maybe a couple more seconds than just typing up a generic, thank you so much for your time. Would love to hear back from you. I mean, you are just going to absolutely stand out. And again, people are busy, but don't be afraid to be annoying, right? Like, if you are really interested and you want to work for JP Morgan, I mean, have monthly contact with those interviewers, and, whether it's from, Google alerts saying, hey, I noticed that your division, did this deal, or, you guys ran this marketing campaign, or, whatever it may be, even if it's, hey, I was in class and we were learning about, interest rates for banks. And I just thought that was super interesting. And it made me think back to our conversation, hope you're doing well. I mean, any way that you can stay top of mind to where, when positions come open, they're going to remember you and think, this is an interested student. This is someone who is willing to put in the time and effort to, make, show that they really want to work here. Like, yes, I'm absolutely going to take a chance on them over some, Ivy League student, because at the end of the day, they're going to put in more time. They're going to work harder, and they're going to, be someone who wants to be here, who I want to be around. So these are just, again, our 5 golden rules of interviewing. Granted, yes, there's always more that you can do, but from experience, if you will do these things, I will guarantee that you will stand out against so many candidates in interviews, because no one else is doing this. And if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to do those things, that sounds really hard, that's exactly why the other 99% of applicants aren't doing it. Because quite honestly, like Parker said, it should be a part-time job. It's not pleasant. It's not, everybody's favorite thing to do. But if you do it, I will guarantee you will land at whatever firm you want to.
Justin, go ahead, Parker.
I would just like to add one point that like, interviewing at really prestigious or hard to get in places is a challenge, and there's going to be a lot of people in your personal network in the school that may doubt you, that may say, oh, like, good luck kind of thing, and not necessarily give you a ton of support. Just ignore those people, because USC students are just as capable of getting these jobs. It just takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And instead, find the people who believe in you and are willing to support you. Those are the ones that are worth your time. And so really focus on surrounding yourself with those people that are going to be great mentors and helpers as you navigate this journey, because it is hard, but it's 100% doable from anyone in the school that's willing to put in the time and effort at the start.
Couldn't agree more, Parker. Thank you so much for adding that. Justin, Parker, thank you so much for preparing this. Tons of great applicable things that we hope that all of the students here at the Huntsman School can implement. If we just network and then keep networking, do our homework beforehand, know their stories by heart and tailor it to each and every interview, go with each interview with genuine predetermined questions, and then follow up with all of the different logistical step-by-steps you outline in each of those things, I know for a fact we're going to have better placement at better firms across the whole school. Justin, Parker, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining in at Backpack to Briefcase.